is basically the planning and monitoring part, the first stage of business analysis. So, what does this whole planning and monitoring entail? What are the various aspects of planning that you have to do? What planning do you do basically? So, you basically plan for 5 things. First is business analysis approach. Stakeholder engagement. How do you engage your stakeholders? We'll talk about business analysis approach in detail, so I'll just skip that for a second. Yeah. So the first step is plan the business analysis approach, which is all about the agile waterfall. How do you do your work on a day-to-day basis? So we'll delve deep into it in a short while. So I'll just hold describing that for the moment. The next aspect is stakeholder engagement. Now, remember, we talked about stakeholders, who stakeholders are. You need to have a plan on how you intend to engage with them when you meet them. You cannot directly blindly go set up a meeting, say hi, hello, and start a conversation. You need to have a thorough planning done in order to engage with your stakeholders. What are the various things you do as part of that planning? We will discuss as part of this segment. Business analysis governance. Again, extremely important, especially in the early days of a project or a product development. What is governance? Who are the decision makers? Who are the ones who will decide what is to be done, not done? Who will approve things? Who will reject things? Who will sponsor things? You need to have a who's. If I have a question about a particular thing, who do I go to? All this information has to be assembled, accumulated, and presented in one place, so that in the middle of the project, if something goes wrong or someone needs some help, people don't have to run around trying to figure out who to contact. That's governance. We'll talk more about it under this section. Planning of information management. Now remember, every meeting you have, every discussion you do, every decision you take generates new information. How do you manage that information? It's all about documentation. So this whole segment is how do you plan your documentation? And finally, you need to have some parameters set for measuring performance improvements. What does that mean? So let's say I'm doing some business analysis, and my business analysis is working fine as per my understanding. But is it really working fine? I need to have some metrics which will tell me that yes, if you have achieved this much deadlines, this part is a check. If your quality is good, this is okay. If people are giving positive feedback, this is okay. So you need some numbers, you need some statistics and values and metrics to decide whether your business analysis is working as expected. Again, it's not a measurement of the business analyst, it's a measurement of the business analysis tasks. There's a significant difference. So we are not measuring a person's performance here. We are focusing on the activities itself, whether they are being taken care of the way they should be. So if you remember, I told you the core concepts we'll keep seeing every now and then. So what this slide, we will have encounter a slide like this every now and then. What this is doing is basically breaking down this particular topic. So let's say our goal is to understand planning and monitoring. That itself is being broken down into the 6 core concepts. So what is the change? So you, during business analysis, planning and monitoring, BAs are responsible for determining how changes to BA results will be requested and authorized. So what this slide is doing is trying to reinforce the 6 core concepts by breaking down every topic of the training session in the 6 core concept format, nothing else. So I don't want to read through all of them. You guys can read through it. It's basically just to reinforce the 6 core concepts, and you remember them by the end of these sessions. Okay, let's come to this diagram. Diagrams are extremely important for business analysts. And the reason for that is diagrams make communication easy. If I had written a long paragraph of 300 words describing exactly what is there in this image, it would probably take you at least 10 minutes to read through it and understand it. But if you look at this diagram, what does it show? It shows three segments. What is the input? Meaning, what do you already have before you start your business analysis, planning and monitoring? So you already at this stage know what your needs are. Sorry about that. So the first step is basically what you already know or have before starting planning and monitoring. What are those two things? Needs. Without knowing what needs you have to address, you can't even do any business analysis. So you always start your journey with trying to figuring out what the needs are. Second is performance objectives. Now, you as a business analyst might be assigned certain objectives or performance metrics which are external to your business analysis process. Maybe your organization says that you are hired in this job, you have to basically do so and so and so things. These are your objectives. If you do them right, you will get confirmed as a permanent employee. Your probation will be over. Now, those objectives are set for you to measure your performance, but they are not part of your project. They are not part of your team's uh, uh, initiative to develop something. It is your organizational policy. It's external to it. Hence, these two things will be guiding you throughout this, because they will already have some expectations as part of the job descriptions or hiring practices or whatever. I mean, there'll be some KRA set, key responsibility areas, and then you know what your customers' needs are. Based on that, you perform these 5 tasks: planning of BA approach, stakeholder engagement approach, governance, information management, and performance improvement metrics. And what do you get out of it? What's the output? The output is you end up with a detailed business analysis approach, a finalized stakeholder engagement plan or approach, governance approach, information management approach, and business analysis performance assessment. These are the deliverables or outputs of these 5 tasks. Now let's start with the first aspect, that's plan business analysis approach. So what is this approach all about? It's basically the overall method of work that you will follow when you are doing your business analysis for any initiative. How will you perform your tasks? What meetings will you have? What schedules will you maintain? How often will you gather requirements? How often will you talk to your stakeholder? Well, that comes under stakeholder engagement. But how often will you document stuff? How often will you attend meetings with certain specific high-level stakeholders? It's basically your day-to-day work as a business analyst. Now, how do you decide that? You decide that based on these 4 specific conditions. Whichever approach you choose has to be in alignment with the overall goals of the change. You can't choose an approach which doesn't fit the goals of whatever you're trying to implement. Let me give an example to that. Let's say my overall objective is to deliver an application to a particular team in the next 3 months. It's a very specific goal. Now you choose an approach which will take 3 months just for analysis. You can't choose it. It won't work. So make sure you choose an approach which will fit the overall goals of the change. We will come to the approaches in a couple of minutes, so you'll get a better understanding what I mean by the approach itself. You have to ensure all your BA tasks and activities are coordinated. You cannot follow one approach for a certain set of activities and another approach for another set of activities. Although I am saying this, there are real world companies which do this. We'll talk about it in a short while. Include tasks to manage any risks that could reduce the quality of business analysis deliverables. If there is a risk which will lead to you not delivering something at a particular stage, focus on that first and use the best approaches and techniques and tools that have worked really well in the past. I go to a session, I listen to some guy speaking about a new technique. I want to implement that in my team. I should not randomly pick a technique or just introduce a new technique just like that. Never do that. If you are really impressed by a new technique, new tool, new approach, first educate your people. Might move into that process in a smooth way. Do not push them. Well, it depends on the if it is about becoming agile. There are two opinions. If you want to implement agile for the first time in a company, let's say you have a team of 50 people and you want them all to start working in agile. Today they have no idea what agile is. So there are two approaches people feel are suitable for making them agile. One is make them agile, take away all the other options. Don't leave any other old options, just make sure that they follow agile and only agile. That's the only way they'll learn. There is a second school of thought which says ease them in. Let us give them concepts of agile in a bit by bit fashion, and over time there will come a time where everything is done according to agile. There is no waterfall or traditional approaches left. I don't know which is better, which is not better, because I have never tried both approaches. I have been in an environment where the I evolved with my organization. When I was learning agile, my company was learning agile as well. So for me it happened simultaneously. So my company, there was nobody trying to force agile on all of us, because they were also learning agile at the same time. So the evolution happened together, so I could never see the difference. But I've heard from agile coaches and people who specialize in agile trainings that, so I've heard certain people, agile coaches especially, and trainers who train people on agile, mm, speak of these two approaches. Few people prefer the hard stop, like you have to use this tool, you have to use this system, you have to use this approach, no alternatives. And the other school is, let's do it smoothly, slowly, and bit by bit, whichever works. But bottom line, make sure that you check that whatever you are choosing, it's not completely new. Do a background study, do some homework, ensure that these things have previously worked well. Don't bring in some untested technique, untested tool or approach into a project, because that would put the project at risk. So you start with needs. So this is your input. You already know what your needs are, or at least we know the definition of needs. So we'll not go into that again. You plan your business analysis approach. You end up with your business analysis approach. So what is this planning of approach mean? So technically speaking, there are only two approaches: predictive approach and adaptive approach. The predictive approach is what you can say or call as the traditional approach. What do I mean by that? Let me show you an example. Now, we are going to understand two concepts here simultaneously. One is, we are definitely going to understand what is predictive approach, what is adaptive approach, and we will also simultaneously understand the software development life cycle. I'll explain both of all three concepts in detail, so don't worry about it. Those of you who know what these are, you already know. So just consider this as a refresher. Any development of software, or forget software, any kind of development of new things, any new product, any new service, if you are building something new, you will always follow these 5 steps. I mean, of course, there are some other structures where you will they break down some of these models. So let me just show you that as well. Let me start with SDLC and then I'll go to the approach part. And then we'll go back to the second image. So let's look at this image first. You start your work with planning. Anything that you want to do in software development, any software you want to build, it always starts with a planning phase. You have a plan, you think, okay, we'll do this, we'll meet the business analysis planning. All of that is part of the planning stage. The developers will do their planning. How many systems do we need? What licenses do we need? Do we need to buy more licenses, set up some new code, things like that. All of that part of planning. Once your planning is done, you start analyzing. This is where most of your business analysis happens. You start talking to people, you start going through documents, start going exploring existing systems, see how things are today. Current state of things you need to analyze extremely in depth. That is your analysis phase. The design phase is where you are coming up with the future state solution. You are trying to come up with a solution that will solve the current state problems or current state opportunities that are not yet being leveraged. Once your design is complete, those, remember we spoke about high level design and low level design, all of that happens as part of design. Once design is complete, that goes to implementation, where the programmers simply just make a code. They just do the coding, get it done. Once coding is done, it goes into testing and integration. Someone has to test what has been developed. Is it working as expected or not? And sometimes you have to do integration. Well, most times, almost always, you have to do integration, because when coding happens, it happens on local developers local system. So there are, let's say, 5 developers in the team. Each developer is working on one requirement, so total 5 requirements are getting worked, and they are working on their personal laptops, and they are building code specifically for each requirement. You will have to make sure that those small bits of code that each five of these people are creating, it all goes into one main code, which is your main product or project software. So you have to integrate these new bits of code with the main code. That's what integration is. And of course, testing, you all know, you have to test it. Once testing is done, you deliver it to whoever is going to use it. You have to maintain the product, you have to monitor it, you have to see if everything is working perfectly. If there are problems, you have to provide support, all of that. And during maintenance, if you find more problems, or you find that there are still certain things which are not yet solved, you again start the cycle again with planning, analysis, design, implementation, testing, and integration. The cycle keeps continuing on and on and on until you reach a point where there are no problems to be fixed or no opportunities to be leveraged. It's an important concept if you are trying to apply for a BA role in any software company, which is where you will find most of the openings are. You will probably be asked about whether you know SDLC. Predictive, again, same set of things: analyze, design, build, test, deliver. The only difference is in SDLC, you have testing and integration and maintenance as two separate fields. Here it is part of delivery. If you break delivery into two parts, it's the same thing, one and the same thing. So if you are in any industry which is not software, which is not developing a software, you will still be doing these. Doesn't matter which industry, pharma, manufacturing, automobile, anything. You have to analyze stuff, you have to design stuff, you have to build stuff, you have to test stuff, and then you deliver the stuff. That's how it works everywhere. The only thing is, if you are specifically working in software development field or IT industry, we like to have our own jargon. So we call the same predictive approach as SDLC, and we have made it a cycle. So here also it's basically a cycle. So analyze, design, build, test, deliver. Something else comes up, again you start analysis. So it's a cycle here as well. That's the traditional approach of predictive methodology. If you are in the software industry, you call it software development lifecycle. Starts with planning, analysis, design, implementation, testing, and maintenance. If you are not in the software industry, you still do the same things: analyze, design, build, test, deliver. Deliver is equal to testing, integration, and maintenance. And you go back to analyze. I hope up to this point it is clear. If you are in the software industry, you call it software development lifecycle. If you are in any another industry, you call it the predictive approach. Straightforward. Okay. Now let's take a look at something very specific. If you look at the predictive approach, what is the biggest challenge or shortcoming I don't want to use the word shock. I don't want to use a negative word for it, but it's not about negative or positive. It's all about what matters in that particular situation. But there is one thing that predictive approach takes a lot of time and takes a lot of costs. How? Let me explain. This bucket that you see, analyze. So this predictive approach is also, it also has another name. It's also known as phase wise. So if you are using predictive approach in software development, you will call it phase wise development or waterfall development. We will talk about waterfall in a slightly different context in a short while, so don't worry about that. But what it is basically is the work happens in phases, meaning when analysis is happening, it's the analysis phase. Nobody is going to work on designs, nobody is going to work on building, testing, delivery, nothing. All of those things are nowhere in the picture. A dedicated team of BAs will be simply analyzing the requirements. That's all that will be happening for that project. Once all the analysis is complete, let me give you an example and correlate it with example. It will make it easy. Let's say I have to build a food delivery app. Straightforward, simple example. I am the BA. I've been hired to, you know, do business analysis for this project where we have to deliver a food delivery app. Let's say in a period. Let's forget the time. We have to deliver a food delivery app. If I'm using the traditional predictive approach, I will say that okay, great. Let us get all the BAs. If I'm the only one, I'll be the only one BA. I'll say I'll need 2 months time to analyze all the requirements to deliver this food delivery app end to end. Fine. I spend 2 months. I gather all the requirements. I come up with a list of, let's say, 1,000 requirements. If those 1,000 requirements are met, then the food delivery ad would be completely ready and can be delivered to production. Awesome. Great. Done. Once these 1,000 requirements are listed, structured, I put them into a document, detail them out. I pass that document to the next team, which is the design team, which is primarily who? The technical architects, tech leads, dev leads. We talked about it yesterday. If they have any questions, they might come back to me and get clarifications, but mostly my job is done. If you are working in predictive, the way you have to create your documentation is people have as less questions as possible. So once you give over that document, they should not come back to you to get any clarifications. That's also an expectation, by the way. Now what do I do? The BA, what should the BA do now? His job is done. He created a list of 1,000 requirements, detailed them. Let's say everything is very very clear, nothing confusing, everything is, down to the letter, explained in excellent way. The 1,000 requirements now move to the design phase. What does the BA do? More importantly, at this stage, what does your programmer do? What does your tester do? What does your delivery team, the maintenance team, do? They don't have any work, right? Because the work is still being analyzed. What are these other guys going to do? So the way it works in the real world is, I'm sure nobody uses traditional waterfall anymore. But when it was used extensively, what people used to do was they would revolve or rotate the teams. So let's say there is a team of 5 BAs, 20 developers, 2 architects, 10 testers, and 5 people in the support team. What they'll do is they'll bring all the 5 BAs into the project, they'll give them the analysis task. While they are working on the analysis task, the designers are working on some other project. The programmers are working on some other project. Testers are doing testing of some other project. Support team is supporting some other project. When this set of requirements will come to design phase, they'll move the designers, they'll tell the designers in that particular project that, look, you have to finish your work by the time the analysis is complete for project number 1. So be prepared. They will coordinate, collaborate. They'll know when analysis will be complete. The moment analysis is complete, they will now come back to project 1. They'll finish the work in project 2, hand it over to programmers come to project 1. Project 1 will now be in the design phase. The BAs are now moved to a project 3. So there is a lot of lot of rotation of team members happening. Nobody is particularly associated with the project for a long time. I work as a BA. I gather 1,000 requirements. My job is done. Now I move to a different project. I start figuring requirements for that. The designer comes. They do the LLDs, HLDs. They are done with the project. They move to some other project. So the challenge with this approach was, one, it takes lot of resource costs. This is cost. If I have to keep moving people here to there to there to there, it's basically human resources. So the cost is high and it takes time. You are analyzing all 1,000 requirements in one go. You are designing a solution for all the requirements in one go. Same for building, testing, and delivering. Everything is happening for 1,000 requirements. It is definitely going to take some time. Now imagine someone comes and says, a business owner comes and says, Pawan, I need this food delivery app. You ask me any questions you want, but I want this app ready and I want to launch a business with it. Awesome. You tell him that, okay, I'll take 2 months just to analyze. Then my designer will come up with a solution in the next 2 months. Building will take 3 months. And testing will take 1 month, and delivery and integration will take 1 month. 1 year gone. Until this happens, the client, the customer, does not even get to see what is being developed. There is no customer interaction between analyze and deliver. They are part of analysis phase where you or the BAs interact, and they're part of the delivery when they receive the product. For a long period of time in between, when the development is happening, the customers don't get to see the product. They don't get to use the product. A simple example for this is fighter jet manufacturing. An Air Force gives an order to an aircraft manufacturing company that I need 100 fighter jets. The business analysts, if they call themselves that, they don't. They call themselves aerospace engineers, but they are doing business analysts. They will go, they'll sit with these Air Force pilots, they'll ask them what are their needs, what kind of missiles they want, what kind of radars they want. They'll gather all the requirements, they'll analyze all of them, structure them, and they'll pass it to the design engineering team. The design engineering team will now come up with a model aircraft which will have all these features. It will not be a real plane. It will be a model, maybe a 3D model or a plastic model to show how the aerodynamics would look like. And once that is done, the wind tunnel testing happens in this phase. So they build small models, scale models. Like a fighter aircraft is huge, right? So they'll make a 4x4 or 5x5 model of the aircraft, which they'll put into a wind tunnel and see if it's aerodynamically fluid to resist the changes in the air pressure and fly. Most importantly, fly. Once the designs are complete, the calculations are done, equations are ready, they'll pass it to the building teams, which is the actual manufacturing teams. They will now start assembly of the aircraft. Once the aircraft is built, it is not handed over to the Air Force. It is sent to a test pilot. All these aircraft manufacturing companies have test pilots. The test pilots will fly the plane, test. You must have seen Top Gun, the most recent one. What does Tom Cruise do in the initial few scenes? He's a test pilot. He's become a test pilot. He's flying new high-end, high-tech aircraft that are just coming out. So there are test pilots. And once the test pilots approve that, yes, this plane meets all the standards as requested by the specific Air Force, then that plane is delivered and more planes are delivered in the same configuration. Same thing used to happen in software. Doesn't happen in software anymore. Now remember, one of the most important things, predictive approach is not a bad approach. It is just not suitable for software development. It is still used in aircraft manufacturing or any manufacturing or any industry which is high risk, where people can lose lives. If you build an aircraft which is not aerodynamically fit, takes off, crashes, problem. So you don't want, you would love to take more time in building the plane so that when the plane is delivered, the number of accidents or crashes are limited. Same doesn't apply to software. What's the worst that you can have that can happen if your software stops working? You'll lose business for a few hours, few days, depending on the type of problem. That's the worst that can happen. There is no threat to life, there is no threat to severe finances. Some serious finance companies and algorithms and software, they are also becoming agile, but they still use certain traditional methods to avoid the uncertainty or risk. Another important point between predictive and whatever the agile is, we'll come to agile now, but before that, another reason why predictive sometimes is suitable in some cases and not suitable in other cases is, if you are in an industry where technology doesn't change that often, predictive is good for you. What do I mean by that? Same example, aircraft, aeroplanes. When did the Wright brothers fly their first aircraft, the wooden airplane? Somewhere 1900s, right? Some 1900, early 1900s, if I'm not wrong. I don't remember the exact year. But the real modern metal airplanes started let's put it that way, metal airplanes started flying after 1930s. First World War end, they started coming up with some models, and primarily it was the Second World War when you had proper metal airplanes flying. Before that, the airplanes were primarily made of wood, or they were made of metal frames with cloth and fabric tied around. Only after 1930s, when before the starting of World War II, is when the metal airplanes started coming into the forefront. Now, metal airplanes of 1935, 1940, and metal airplanes of today. You might argue that things have changed drastically. Yes, the modern planes are way faster. Mach 5, Mach 6 speeds. They have stealth capabilities. You can't detect them with radar. True. They can carry more missiles, guided missiles. Awesome. Yes. They have advanced radar systems inbuilt so they can detect another aircraft kilometers away. True. But did the basic technology of how an aircraft flies change in all these years? And the answer is no. The basic aerodynamic principle, where a propeller or a jet engine creates a vacuum at the below of the plane and more air pressure is created at the top of the plane, which gives the aircraft the lift it requires, still remains the same. Same for a car. The first car, I don't know, 1930s, Model T, Ford Model T was the first car, right? Since then, diesel engines and petrol engines, now CNG engines, electric engines, the principle has not changed. Yes, there are better technologies which are more efficient. They give you more power, they give you more speed, they make things smoother, but the core principle behind all of them is exactly the same. Same for spacecraft, rockets. Apollo 11 rocket, we still use chemical propellants. I mean, of course, there is some advanced research happening for alternative methods, but any rocket, whether it's a SpaceX launching tomorrow or ISRO launching a rocket tomorrow, they are all cryogenic engines. They are all based on two fuels, liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen, a combination of both. I mean, there used to be solid fuels and then there are liquid fuels, but they use the same thing, chemical propulsion. You burn chemicals, the burning of the chemical generates massive thrust. That massive thrust propels your object towards space. That technology has not changed. So these industries, the technology doesn't change that often. But can you say the same thing for software? I mean, look at software today. I mean, 2 years back, you did not have AI. 5 years back or 8 years back, you did not have machine learning algorithms. A few years before that, everything was regular expressions. Then came .NET and Java and all the programming logic. So within a year or two or three, you are having major, massive technology changes happening in an industry like software. Here, you cannot go with the predictive approach, because what if while you are building the product, some new technology comes out, your product has become obsolete now. It takes 10 years to build an aircraft, because everybody knows in 10 years the generation of the aircraft doesn't change. Yes, it might have a few additional advantageous technologies compared to other aircraft, but so fighter aircraft are classified on generations: first gen, second gen, third gen, fourth gen, 4.5 gen. Today there is fifth gen, and I think China has recently tested a sixth gen aircraft as well. Bottom line, it takes 10 to 12 years to move from one generation to another. Software happens in a year, in couple of months as well. You never know, someone might come up with a software which revolutionizes whole technology tomorrow morning. So you cannot use predictive where technology changes rapidly, especially in software. Why? Because you start analysis, design, building, suddenly AI comes in. You have to go back to analysis. Now your requirements are completely outdated. That is another reason where you can use predictive and where you can use agile or adaptive. Now let's understand, how is agile or adaptive different from predictive? Now, if you look at this image, you are seeing the same five things, right? Analyze, design, build, test, and deliver. They don't change. You still have to analyze, you still have to design, you still have to build, test, and deliver. The only difference is, instead of taking all 1,000 requirements, analyzing them first, phase one, phase two, you move them to design, finish it, phase three, building, send it to build. Instead of doing that, you are splitting those 1,000 requirements into smaller buckets. Let us say I split those 1,000 requirements into five buckets, each of 200 requirements. 200 here, 200 here, 200 here, 200 here, 200 here. Once I finish my first 200 requirements, I'm able to deliver something, right? And something is always better than nothing. Let's go back to the food delivery app. Yes, today I don't have anything. There is no application. In the next 2 months or in the next 2 weeks, you will give me an application where I can at least register and create accounts. Nothing else is possible. I can just register and create accounts. The customer can still do marketing. They can say that a new revolutionary food delivery app is coming. Please register now and you will get some bonus coupons, or you will get something. Some advertising, some marketing can happen. They can use the product with just that limited capability. Of course, the whole food delivery thing won't happen, but at least they can use that small set of registration features and gain some traction with customers. They can gain customer acquisition, marketing, advertising. They can generate value from whatever you build in this one phase. After 2 weeks, you give 10 more requirements. You add, let's say, inventory management. You can browse through restaurants, you can browse through food menus. You can't order anything yet. Yes, it's still not an online delivery app, but I can market it to my customers saying that, look guys, those of you who have registered, now you can check your nearby restaurants and the menus they are offering, and you can go for fine dining there. So if you are planning to go out on a nice date, check out our app. You will get the menu, you will get the latest menu, updated menu, and the restaurant details on our app. Still usable, not fully functional, but usable. Then I add, let's say, the actual booking of the food item, and delivery has to go together, otherwise you book and doesn't make sense, right? So you do booking and delivery, but payment options, right now you don't have the ability to do all the payment options. So you just do cash on delivery. Now a person can register, log in, check the items, select an item, select cash on delivery, book the item, they get the food item delivered. So the development model of adaptive or agile specifically is an iterative and incremental approach. The first one, traditional approach, is a phase-wise approach, whereas adaptive and agile approach is an incremental and iterative approach. You keep repeating the 5 steps: analyze, design, build, test, and deliver for limited set of items, and you keep doing it again and again and again, and you keep delivering items in an incremental manner. Today you give five, a week from now you'll give five more after that, five more after that, so on and so forth, until you finish all 1,000 requirements. And that's when you can say that yes, we are done. I'm showing real waterfalls. The reason we call it waterfall is it happens again. Software people are crazy that way. They don't like. They want to be different, so they created their own visualization, and they gave a new name to it. We don't want to call it predictive, so we will arrange it in a way where it looks like it's a waterfall, and we'll call it a waterfall model. So they gave a new name. End of the day, it's the same thing. The five aspects of predictive and adaptive that we talked about. Yes, they added requirements, design, development. I mean, the naming conventions can slightly vary, but it's essentially the same thing. And it's called waterfall. Why? Because when arranged like this, it looks like a waterfall. Now remember, adaptive is not equal to agile. Agile is one of the methodologies that fall under adaptive. There are many more methodologies that used to be in play at some point or the other. V model is one such. There is something called spiral. Now, what happened? People had the traditional waterfall approach, but they realized that technology is changing fast, the risk is less, and the customers want to see the product early. They can't wait for 5 years to see their own product. So they started innovating. They started coming up with new ways of doing development. And that led to all these different models. We will not go through all of them because none of them are going to be used anywhere today. They're all obsolete. It's just theory knowledge now. I mean, if someone wants to take an exam, maybe they'll ask you what is V model, spiral, and all these different adaptive models. But the thing is, nobody uses them anymore because all these individual different models had certain good things in them, certain negatives in them, and all the good things were taken from all these places, refined, and they were now finalized as under one big umbrella as agile. So V module has its own shortcomings. Spiral has its own shortcomings. So there are different models. All of them have their own shortcomings every now and then. And the smart guys, they took the best out of everything and came up with what we know today as agile. So we'll only focus on agile. Going forward, we won't discuss anything about waterfall anymore, but you needed to know, to understand agile, you have to know what is the other approach, the predictive approach or waterfall approach. And the reason we are discussing this as part of planning and monitoring is, guys, usually you have to figure out which approach is suitable for your project. But realistically, that's theoretically, realistically, it would be chosen for you. You don't have a choice as a business analyst unless you have your own consultancy and you are doing private consultancy. But if you work for an organization, it's usually the organization which has already decided which approach it wants to follow for its software development. If they decide for some reason to go with predictive, I have not yet met any. I interviewed one company some 5-6 years back, where the interviewer literally bluntly told me that, look, we don't do agile at our company, we are a purely waterfall company, are you comfortable with that? And my straightforward answer to that was, sorry, I know all the theory, I've never worked in waterfall, so if you expect me, I know I can do it, I'm willing to do it, but I'm more proficient in agile, which was a polite way of saying, sorry, let's end this interview as soon as possible. But that was a different thing, because I never know, I've never worked in any other model except agile, because my career, as I told you, progressed with the adoption of agile in my company. So both of us learned agile, and that's all I know. I know the theory for predictive. I know the theory for R. I know the theory for V model. I know the theory for what is the other one, spiral, but I've never actually practiced it. But you get into a company, you join the company, and if that's when you know what approach they are using, you have to learn it. There's no alternative, or change the job if you don't like the approach. You don't have a choice on choosing the approach 99.9% of the times. So the another reason why you would think of choosing a particular approach is for formality and level of detail. So what do I mean by that? A lot of times, even fully functional agile teams, you will notice that at times use traditional approaches for certain aspects of business analysis. What do I mean by that? So I'll give you an example from one of my past companies. I was part of this company which was fully agile. We used to work in iterations, we would do planning, and do all the things that happen in agile. However, we were building a product. It was a system that would do a certain number of things, and this system had to be integrated with a third party system which was being developed by another company, and together it would increase the revenues. It would basically achieve certain business objectives. Now this other company was also fully agile. They also had iterations, they also had sprints, they were also following agile to the letter. But when we came together for that integration to happen, and certain dependencies on both sides have to be fixed, and then we would basically become like, I won't say it become one system, but two integrated systems, let's call it that. There was a lot of contracts involved, legal documentation, formal documentation. There was a lot of formality involved. Why? Because it's a different company. If you don't deliver something in a particular time frame, they will simply say that you didn't deliver, so now we are not going to pay the money, or there was money involved basically. For that reason, both the companies agreed that the documentation that will be done as part of business analysis for requirements and designs will be as per the traditional model. What is the traditional model? You do all the analysis, research, put them down in one big document, share the document, and once that document is approved, work will start on that. Because it was a limited project, number one, it was not like you are trying to build a project spanning multiple years. We had fixed deadlines, like within next 3 months we'll work on, the next 3 to 6 months was a timeline, and we had very fixed goals. We have to achieve these 4 or 5 things. Once that is done, integration will happen, testing will happen, close, chapter close, nothing else. So companies do this, where you have a lot of formal documentation. If you are in the legal industry, if you are building software, legal software, banking software, or software which is a little bit more, which requires that formality, you will prefer creating documentation in the old format. What is that old format? I'll show you both of them today itself. So the new format, we create user stories. In the old format, you would create documents known as BRDs, FRDs, FSRS. There are different naming conventions. I'll go through all of them in a short while. And it's an exhaustive and very long form documentation type. It's not like you just capture one requirement, add some requirements, details, and done. No, it's a very formal, structured document with a lot of elements to it. And I'll show you the sample as well. So a lot of times you need to change your business analysis approach depending on the level of formality, and sometimes the level of formality of the documentation, primarily documentation, especially if it involves legal matters, contractual obligations, those kind of things. You need to use extreme formal documentation, which is preferred with predictive methods, where you create these long form documents. Whereas in adaptive, It's all about people over process. So you, the more importance or emphasis is given in conversations, in interactions, in meetings, and you capture the information, yes, but you don't capture it in that formal sense. Meaning, of course, here also there are certain formalities you have to fulfill, but it's more of a short, you focus on a specific requirement, you detail it out, you confirm it, verify it, update the information, and you are done. Long form exhaustive documentation is avoided. I'll show you the differences in a short while. So when do you use this long form documentation? When the change is extremely complex and high risk, when there is a lot of complexity involved or high risk financial software primarily. Organization interacts with heavily regulated industries. If you are building a software for pharma industry, drug testing, and I have been in products, my products didn't directly deal with drug testing, but we did offer services to drug testing domain as well. And we've seen it. You need long form documentation because there are heavily regulated industries. Any one mistake, government will come down on you heavily. Contracts, agreements require formality. I just gave you an example of that. The other points, not so much. Stakeholders are geographically distributed. Yes, traditionally it was thought that if people are distributed all over the world, you can't trust them to do their work. So you need to basically have detailed documentation, formal documentation. Resources are outsourced. This happens even till date. If you are especially working in companies like TCS, Infosys, Wipro, you will still be expected to create those long form BRDs and FRDs and SRS. Why? Because the company which is giving you the contract is outsourcing its work to a company like TCS or Wipro. They're not building products for themselves. They are basically giving the work to someone else to do. They don't have that trust factor. So they want everything in long form documentation. It still happens. Staff turnover is high or team members may be inexperienced. Again, trust factor. People are leaving the company every now and then. So your team is very raw, very untrained, very new set of people. Every now and then the people are new. So you cannot have, you lack the trust that they will get the job done. So you require really hard documentation so that nothing goes wrong. Formal sign off happens in both cases, to be honest. Just like geographical location is not a matter anymore, because these days we have tools of good tools of communication. So irrespective, my current team is completely geographically distributed. I'm the BA, I'm situated in India. My development team sits in India, my QA team sits in India, some QA sit in India, some QA sit in Eastern Europe. My business teams are in US. My most of my management is in US. So it's a distributed, geographically distributed set of stakeholders we manage. Why? Because we have these wonderful tools to work with. Teams, Microsoft Teams, Web, the one that we are using. What is this one? WebEx, all these tools. And requirements have to be maintained for long term or handed over for use on future initiatives. So long term maintenance you can still do. Even if you are using agile and user stories and tools like Jira, you can use it for long term. You can maintain them for long term use. But let's say I have to hand over the requirements, I can't keep them with me. The only way to do that is create a document, hand over the document, and be done with it. So there are certain considerations where traditional formal level of documentation approaches are used. Even though the teams are fully agile, they work in an agile environment, certain aspects of business analysis are still traditional in the way, meaning they follow the practices followed in waterfall. Now let's take a quick look at some key differences. In predictive, the solution, the complete solution is defined before implementation to maximize control and minimize risk. Everything is broken down, detailed out, ironed out. All the solution details are finalized before you actually start any work on implementing it. Adaptive works in iterations. You only focus on a small piece of work, Once that is done, then you pick the next set of work, you refine it, so on and so forth. Formality, there are standardized templates in predictive approach. I will share one such template and I'll explain the details of it as well. Information is gathered through team interaction and feedback. You have meetings after meetings after meetings. Agile means meetings. They're called as ceremonies in Agile. Again, a fancy term, but they're just meetings. You meet with your stakeholders almost every day. All the stakeholders meet together at least once every day. Then there are specific meetings with specific set of stakeholders at different times in a week. Constant meeting, constant feedback, and whatever information is gathered, you document that in tools like Jira or Confluence, which we will also see later. Activities required to complete deliverables are first identified and then divided into tasks. What does that mean? You focus on deliverables and then divide the work. Okay, I have to deliver this food delivery app. It needs to have these 15 features. So let's break it down. When do I have to deliver the 15 features? We will deliver these 15 items by end of the year. So in January, the analysis needs to complete. By Feb end, design has to complete. By July or August, development has to be done. By September, testing has to be done. And by December, delivery has to happen. That would be the timeline. So you focus on the deliverables and then you break it into tasks. Agile or adaptive, completely opposite. You divide the activities into iterations with deliverables first. So you are focusing on the total requirements, you are breaking them down first, and then you are focusing on what you will deliver, because deliverables might change in adaptive. You might think you will deliver these 5 things by the end of this week. Suddenly something else comes, you will take that. Another key difference, though, let me emphasize on this one difference. In predictive, change is not welcome. In adaptive, change is welcome. What do I mean by that? Let's say I'm building a fighter aircraft. Some genius in the team or someone in the air force comes and says, I think we should add one more tail. Having one tail is not good enough. Let's add 2 tails to the aircraft. It will be much faster and more maneuverable. You listen to him, you see his data, you know he is right. You know adding a second tail will definitely make the plane much more better, but you will not add it. At least not in that model. You will come up with a new model with the new cycle. All the analysis will happen from scratch, where where this new tail is added, and then a new design is created, but it will be a different model. In adaptive, any change is welcome. Someone says, there's a chat GPT just launched a new subscription model, it's become cheaper, let's integrate it. Awesome, let's do it next sprint. Of course, it also has its checks and balances. You don't take in every change that comes your way. There is a process to it, but changes are not shunned, they are welcome in adaptive. In predictive, they're not shunned, but they're not welcomed either. They are just put into a parking lot and taken up in the next cycle or the next version of that particular product. That particular version, you will not entertain any changes once they're finalized. Analysis done, all requirements logged in, it's gone into design, all designs are final, implementation has started, that's it. No more changes at all. If even if the change is groundbreaking technological innovation, you will put it for the next cycle. You will not take it up in that cycle. That product will go exactly as designed. Timing, we talked about it already. Tasks are performed in phases, whereas in adaptive, they are performed iteratively. Okay, let's finish this and then I'll show you the documents. So the next aspect is what activities, which methodology to use, and what activities to perform. So again, you will probably not have any choice in deciding which methodology to pick. Even if you know that your company is adaptive, will it use agile, will it use spiral? Ideally, you don't have control over it. But let me be very frank, most of the companies either use agile or they use waterfall. Everything in between is squeezed in here and there, but nobody announces that we are using spiral or V model in our development. They don't. Most of the times it's either agile or waterfall. But who knows? There might be a company still which prefers to use some other methodology. But you still don't have any control. If you are into it, you'll have to learn it on the job and work it out. Identify the activities that you have to perform, whichever approach you choose, whichever methodology you choose, that you have to do. Divide the work into iterations. If you are in agile, break it down into each iteration. How do you break it down into iterations? We will talk more about it later. There is something called prioritization, and there are certain techniques known as prioritization techniques, and you'll understand how business analysts break down. Let's say I have 1,000 requirements. Which items do I pick up for iteration one? Which items out of 1,000 will be iteration two, iteration three? There has to be a mechanism for it, right? So there are these techniques known as prioritization techniques. We will go through them, and you will understand how business analysts break down work into iterations. But we will do that in a later session. Also, timing of business analysis activities will be affected by resources, priority, urgency, concurrent initiatives, or contract terms or regulatory deadlines. So, again, you will not have absolute control on resources or priority or urgency or any parallel initiatives happening or any contract terms or regulatory deadlines. You have to adapt yourself. That's the whole key to agile. Be agile, be adaptive, be flexible, and accommodate the project work according to these particular categories. Whatever time framing that you do has to take into account these aspects. And of course, complexity and risk, we already spoke about it. So they always decide how your business analysis work will be impacted. High risk, high complexity takes more efforts, more time, more money, more resources. Low risk, low complexity are quick wins. So we'll go through some prioritization techniques where we will see the same parameters again, as I mentioned in a later session. So these are the factors that impact complexity. So what is complexity? Let me first address that question. Rest everything I think are pretty straightforward, but you have to understand the meaning of complexity in terms of software development. Complexity is not about time. Let's say there is a particular requirement. Developing that requirement will take a certain amount of time depending on who is working on it. If you give that requirement to a senior developer, someone who has 15 years of experience, probably that person will finish that work and deliver it in one day. You give the same work to some trainee developer who has just joined the company after university. That person will probably take a month to finish that one single requirement. Time is subjective. It depends on the experience of the person. But complexity is different. Complexity means what are the various things you have to factor in to achieve a particular requirement. Of course, technical things that you have to analyze. So the developers decide the complexity, and it is totally unrelated to time. People decide complexity based on the technologies used, the logic that you have to build, the activities that you might have to perform in order to build that particular requirement. There are various factors. It's not something which the BAs decide. We leave this to the developers to come up with the complexity of work involved. How do you denote complexity? So we denote it using a scale, an imaginary scale known as the story point. We call it story points in Agile, where you assign a number to every story or every requirement, denoting its complexity. And mostly software companies use the Fibonacci series. Why? Don't ask me why. I also never tried to Google this. You should, if you are interested. So, what is Fibonacci series? 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, so on and so forth. So the Fibonacci series is an infinite series in mathematics. Those of you who have mathematics background would know what infinite series are. There are many infinite series, Euler series, this series, that series, whatnot. So Fibonacci series is one such series which doesn't have an end. And how does it work? So the every next digit in the series is a summation of the current and its previous. So if you see the next digit after, so 1 is 1, so 1 plus 1, there is nothing before, so 1 is 1. Next is 2, up to here it's okay, but the next digit in the line is 1 plus 2. The next digit in the line is 3 plus 2. The next digit in the line is 8 plus 5. So on and so forth. It continues infinitely. Why software teams use this particular notation? I don't know. Google it. Someone might have decided that the word Fibonacci sounds good or the series is interesting. So let's use it as an imaginary scale. Why do I call it as an imaginary scale? If you have gone to the dentist or any doctor for a pain related issue, especially kids, I know they don't ask these questions to adults, but at least kids, they ask this question. um, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain do you think you are in right now? Why do they ask that question? Because there is no scale, there is no machine, there is no meter to measure pain. It's a subjective matter. So they ask you to give a number on a scale of 1 to 10. You probably get an Excel sheet after our sessions. How do you think the trainer communicated in his sessions? Now, communication also is subjective. For some of you guys, I might be pacing it perfectly well. For some of you, probably I'm too fast. For some of you, I'm probably too slow. So again, it becomes a subjective matter. So the point is, you need imaginary scales to measure subjective parameters, and complexity is a subjective parameter. There is no scale, there is no meter, there is no machine to measure complexity of work involved in developing a particular requirement. Hence, need of a imaginary scale. And software guys, being software guys, decided not to use a scale of 1 to 10, but rather use the Fibonacci series. There are other numbers that people use as well, but they're all Fibonacci series. So some start with 1 to 21, some will start with 100, and so on and so forth, but it's always usually the Fibonacci series. And we call this as story points. So again, there are many factors which can include impact complexity, size of the change, things that you have to do. I just mentioned, right? There might be n number of things you have to do to make sure that change is implemented. Number of business areas or systems affected. Let's say your system is interconnected with multiple subsystems or systems. One change in your system will break 10 other systems. It's a complex change. You have to do a thorough impact analysis, increases the complexity. Business areas, one change will impact multiple sales, advertising, marketing, all the departments will have an impact. You have to be very careful about such changes. They are complex changes. Geographic and cultural considerations, again, I have never experienced it, but again, can happen. I won't say it doesn't happen, but theoretically I know it can happen, but I have never experienced it. Depending on the culture and geographical location of the people involved, complexity scales do vary, and I've seen it happen, but I don't know. It's difficult to attribute it to geography or cultural considerations, but the idea is that people in a certain country would consider a certain set of work to be very complex, whereas a certain other group of people will consider that as, piece of cake. Not because they have more knowledge or anything, it's just a culture. Let me give you an example. Go to the United States and ask anyone who works, let's say in the corporate world, if they ever do overtime without being paid for it. What I mean by it is, your manager will come to you and says, we have to meet these targets today, so please stay back for 3 hours after work. That happens only in India. So the manager, when asked about complexity, An Indian manager will simply say, yes, it's not at all complex. We'll deliver it in 5 days. The American manager, because of his or her cultural considerations, will give you a time frame where he will not do any overtime because they will work 9 to 5. US, Europe, that's how the work environment is. Well, in India as well. I'm not saying in India all companies are like that, but I've been in companies where that used to happen, where on a Sunday, on a weekend, you get a call in the morning. The boss says you have to come to office because some targets are still not met, and you run to the office. That doesn't happen in Europe. That doesn't happen in United States. It doesn't happen in many good companies in India. My current company, in fact, scolds me if I do an hour of overtime. My bosses tell me you are not supposed to work apart from your work hours. So that is changing in India as well. But that's one of the cultural considerations. Technological complexity. Certain technologies are complex. If you are changing stuff with heavy dose of machine learning algorithms, it requires a lot of complexity. It involves a lot of complexity. So that becomes part of it. And any other risks that can impede can also increase the complexity. Again, this would be circumstantial. You will have to figure that out based on your surrounding circumstances. Similarly, once now that we have covered complexity, you also have to cover risk. There are many risks. Your very level of experience itself is a risk. That's why if you are someone who is just joining the organization as a new BA with no prior experience, you will probably be not given too many responsibilities. But once you reach a level, senior BA, spent years working on it, everything would be offloaded to you. You not only do the requirements part, you also manage teams at times. You also ensure people are reporting certain stuff on time. You have to be proactive to get those additional responsibilities. Only then people notice that yes, this person is dependable, and that's when they give you those extra. It's just not the number of years you have, it's the kind of work you do that matters. But experience level of business analyst can be a risk item as well. If you have very less experienced BAs in a project which is very complex or has serious business impact, that itself is a risk. Domain knowledge held by the business analysts. So let me talk about this point slightly. So there are two types of business analysts in the world. There are business analysts who are domain business analysts, and there are business analysts who are domain agnostic business analysts. Who are the domain business analysts? They are the business analysts who have spent a certain number of years working only in a specific domain. For example, me. Most of my career is in publishing slash content solutions. I have not, I briefly worked in AI and chatbots, but it wasn't significant enough. Most of my career has been spent on content solutions. If I, with around what, 12 plus years of experience now, apply to a job for any BA role, junior, senior, doesn't matter. Even if I'm willing to take a less salary, which doesn't work out anyways, I mean, then they'll think, why is this person willing to reduce his salary? And that means this guy has some problems. Let's not give him the job. That's a different discussion. But let's say, even if I apply to a role where every other parameter matches my skill set, but the company is building banking software, they will not even give me a phone call. They will reject my resume just by looking at its specifics. If I apply in travel, logistics, pharma, rejected. The only two domains where I can actually claim expertise is content solutions and healthcare, because for the last 4.5 years I've been in healthcare. Bottom line, domain knowledge matters in certain industries. But then what do the other kind of business analysts do? They are by definition domain agnostic. They openly claim that I'm not a master of any domain. But what they have is experience of almost all the domains. How? Most of the times what happens, young guys fresh out of engineering colleges join as a BA, spend 2 years in the banking sector, then jump, work 2 years in the healthcare, jump, move to content solutions 2 years, jump, insurance 2 years, jump. And by the time they reach that 12 years, 15 years mark, they have probably experienced almost all the domains at least for a year or two. And when they apply for these jobs, well, there also there is a consideration. Now it depends on the level of domain expertise these jobs are looking for. Sometimes they get lucky because the way these two BAs are differentiated is the domain agnostic one does not have specialization in any one domain, but knows the basics of every domain, so they can get the deep information from domain subject matter experts. That is the expectation of the interviewer. Whereas when it comes to domain subject matter experts, they are domain experts in that domain. They are the pinnacle, they will be given the first preference. Any other domain, not so much, because they have not even experienced it for even a month or two. 6 months experience is also not there, so the interviewers don't take a chance. Now the choice is yours. Both paths are open to you. Either you spend 2 years jump, 2 years jump, 2 years jump, or you like stability, you like peace, you like a little bit of peace of mind where you know the subject, you can operate easily. You pick a domain and you stick with that domain, especially domains which are slightly more complex like banking, finance. So there's a term for it, BFSI acronym, banking, finance, sales, and insurance. If you are in these domains specifically, domain experience is highly coveted. Job descriptions will explicitly mention we only need BAs with domain experience for these four. For others, you can be a general business analyst, you can move around, gain experience, work around in other companies. But for these four domains, 99% of the times, I have not seen a single job description so far where they don't explicitly mention that domain experience is mandatory, at least for the big companies. I don't know about startups. Level of experience of stakeholders. Now, your experience might be really good. You might have really great domain knowledge, but the people that you are interacting might not have enough experience. Maybe you have a raw team of developers, just freshers hired out of a college. They haven't developed any product yet. Your testers are completely new, they don't know what the system is all about. Your business stakeholders might be good at their business, but they're not good at communicating what they do to you. These are challenges you will experience, and they are risks you have to highlight if you encounter it. Then attitude, again a big problem. See, a business analyst is, I love to call a business analysts are like the diplomats of the world. When countries engage with each other, they send their diplomats first. The diplomats are the first line of people who establish relationships. Same with BAs. And just like a diplomat, you have to take into account stakeholder attitudes. Some guys don't like business analysts. It's a reality. They think, these, why do I need a business analyst? It's my requirement. That's the developer. I can directly talk to the person. Why do I need to talk to this person? Highlight it in your own circles, management, wherever, if you are facing such kind of resistance. Personal attitudes about business analysis. Amount of time allocated by stakeholders to BAs. You need 1 hour time from a senior manager of operations to understand what operations are happening. That person is always busy. Every time you ask him for a meeting request, he or she will say, let's do it next week, let's do it on Monday, let's do it on Tuesday. You're not getting that time. You have to provide your deliverables to your teams. So if that happens, escalate it then and there. Of course, politely. You don't shout at him. You talk to the relevant management and say that, look, I have to have discussions with this guy, but this guy is not available. So please make sure that he attends at least a few calls so that I can get as much information as possible. Even framework can be a risk. What if your project demands agile, but your company doesn't like agile? They want to use waterfall, or they have provided you tools that are not suitable for the project. You will suffer, the project will suffer. Organization policies, practices, they're all things that will impact. And of course, cultural norms of the organization. I'm sure you understand what that means. Toxic work culture, too much stringent, lack of transparency, you cannot talk to people directly. These kind of things are restrictive to a good business analysis journey, so you'll have to navigate these zones. And finally, irrespective of which approach you use, whether it's adaptive or predictive, you have to ensure that you have acceptance. They have to be, there is one word you always have to remember, guys, and that one word is consensus. You cannot do anything in any development process without achieving consensus as a business analyst. So make sure that your approach, whichever approach you decide to go ahead with, it is accepted, is reviewed and agreed upon by at least the key stakeholders. Many, and as I already mentioned, in most organizations this process would already be structured. You probably don't even have to do any of these things. They would already have these agile or waterfall methods in place. You just have to ensure that you are following the rules as set by the organization. If not, you have to ensure acceptance comes first. There are some guidelines and tools you have to take into account: your business analysis, performance assessment, business policies, your very expert judgment, agile, waterfall, the frameworks, the methodologies, the guidelines, they say what are to be followed, and stakeholder engagement approach. All of these things would help you in finalizing your approach. Who are the key stakeholders you will be engaging with during this planning of business analysis approach? Usually the domain subject matter expert, the project manager, because that person would be the one who would be managing the whole project, regulators if involved, and sponsors, the people who are paying the money, because without sponsors approval you cannot decide on how to do the work. They are the ones who have to be looped in these conversations, and you end up with your business analysis approach.